One frustration I often hear from business owners is a disconnect between what they expect their people to do and what their people actually do. Your org chart may be the problem. Hi, my name is John Seifer. I've run companies all my working life. My most lucrative one I ran while living 1,500 miles away. Perhaps the lesson is I should just stay away. So you see, the problem with most org charts is they're great at showing the wrong things. A functional org chart is a way to solve this problem. A typical org chart shows who reports to who and what people's titles are. Cool ones even have people's pictures. And that's normally how we think of a company. It's a collection of people with titles and bosses arranged in a hierarchy. But I'm suggesting you look at your company differently. Rather than seeing it as a collection of people, you can think of it as a collection of functions. Let me define what I mean by a function. It's an activity that takes an input and turns it into an output. Here's one way to visualize it. It has 4 parts. Let's look at the payroll function to show you what I mean. The trigger is whatever day you do payroll, every other Tuesday or whatever. The input is the hours and salaries of everyone for that pay period. The transformation is the calculations for deductions and stuff that the payroll company does. And the output is money going to people's bank accounts, reports to management, and forms to the tax authorities. For other functions, the triggers are different. Sometimes it's a customer placing an order, or it could be an inventory level getting to a certain point, or something else depending on the function. You can think of your company as a whole collection of functions producing outputs. Some functions are done by employees, some done by outside companies like your payroll company. Some are even done by machines or software. For example, your accounting software produces outputs, we call them reports, that people like Bob Cratchit used to do by hand for Ebenezer Scrooge. Obviously, the output is the most important part. That's the reason you spend the time and money having someone perform these functions in the first place. But here's another way to visualize a function. Focus on the output. Every different output that you need requires a different function to be performed. Let's use your home as an example. There are many functions that are required to run your home well. Let's consider them from the viewpoint of the output rather than the people. The meal function has good food as the output. Laundry produces clean clothes. House cleaning is needed to keep your home clean, especially if somebody's coming over. When something breaks, it has to be maintained. If you live alone, you are the one performing all these functions. So your name goes in the box at the bottom of each function, unless you outsource. Maybe you want to eat dinner at a restaurant. Or suppose you're not good at plumbing. You may outsource that. But then you still have to manage that job. So now there's a new function, the plumbing manager, and you perform that one. Your output there is to get prices, to do the scheduling, to inspect the job, and pay the bill. It still takes less skill and less time than fixing the pipes, so it's a wise move. Now, this level of detail sounds really silly for a home. Why? Because a lot of this is intuitive. But in a business, it's that intuition that's the root of the frustration I mentioned earlier. Too often, business owners or managers expect the employees to have the same intuitions that they do about the output that's expected. But they don't. Employers just assume that if they hire good people, those people will be able to figure out which functions they should be performing and which outputs they should produce. But this is a fallacy. This assumption leads to problems that can be corrected by properly describing the outputs required. This includes details like the quantity, the quality, and the productivity you expect. So a manager's first job is to adequately define the outputs required, not to put people in the slots in an org chart. Only after the outputs are defined should the manager assign that function to a person or team with the proper skills to produce the needed output. The manager's third job is to monitor that output for all the details they described in the first part, and provide the employee with the tools, the training, the time, and everything else they need to do a good job. Great managers help their employees continually improve their ability to perform and reward them appropriately. So how do you design a functional org chart? Well, I'm glad you asked. It's right here on this slide. Here are some tips. First of all, don't do it all at once. Start with just the parts of your organization that need it the most. Start by defining the outputs in detail. At the highest level, there's only 3 outputs that every company needs to survive. You need to make something people want to buy. The company has to find those people and sell to them. And you have to support the making and the selling. That's things like collecting money, paying the bills, keeping lights on, hiring people, staying in compliance, all that kind of overhead stuff. As you've probably guessed by now, these are all functions. Next, break down those outputs into required subfunctions based on the capacity and stage of your company. Here's what I mean by subfunctions. This guy and all of these people, they all play the same notes. You could recognize the tune. But each person here is only performing a subset of the whole thing, and they're doing it better than the one-man band, I would wager. Here's what the first level of sub-functions looks like for those 3 top-level outputs. After you've broken down the sub-functions, duplicate functions as needed for capacity. Here we have 6 workers doing the exact same function, producing the exact same output. But you see, I've added a row in this table for capacity. That tells you when you're reaching the capacity of a worker and you're going to need to hire somebody else to get more output. You can add rows for other things like cost or where they get their input or anything else that helps you plan the structure of the organization. After you've duplicated the functions as needed, be sure to define the outputs for managers. Here's one I did to illustrate a janitorial company. You can see there's a janitor, and then there's a simple supervisor level manager. Their output is the quality check on the shift, to do room assignments, to cover for no-shows. That's the output from the manager, not from the janitor. Output for higher level management is often harder than this, but that just means it's more intuitive. Force yourself to be explicit. Maybe the output from a high level manager is certain decisions that they should be making. Maybe it's certain questions that they should be able to answer. Maybe it's questions they should be asking. Think about how you would know a good manager from a bad one. The answer is usually about output, and put that into a function. That's when you should put people's names in the functions, after you've got these functions fully detailed. You can see here Sarah is performing the function of the supervisor, and she performs as a janitor. She's producing 2 sets of outputs. That's because her capacity as a shift supervisor is to manage 5 janitors. But she doesn't have that many. And there are extra rooms that need to be cleaned, and she doesn't have a janitor for them, so she fulfills both functions. Because of her supervisor function, her expected output as a janitor is lower. And so this is how you describe the functions appropriately for the people that are doing the work. And things change as you get new people, as you scale up, you add new sub-functions, etc. This is a living document. But here's a summary of the steps we went over to define a functional org chart. Start small. Define the outputs first, break out any sub-functions that are needed, and duplicate functions for capacity. Then make sure you've defined the management outputs appropriately. Only then do you assign the names. If you got some value here, please like, share, and subscribe. There's more at my YouTube channel, youtube.com/CEO Bootcamp. And if you'd like help with a functional org chart for your company, drop me an email, john@ceobootcamp.com. I look forward to hearing from you.